This is the Code of Federal Regulations for initial evaluations. It's found at 34 CFR, which means Code of Federal Regulations, section 300.301. Now, as we review this, you'll see that some areas are in yellow. Those are areas that we covered in the presentation before this on a simplification of the rules and regulations. So if you want to take a look at that, that's a little bit more simplified. There's some blue areas in here, and those are areas that we didn't cover in the presentation that simplified the rules and regulations. But we will go through the yellow real quickly, and we'll go through the blue also. But this is the rules and regulations, so let's get started. An initial evaluation must be done before any special education or related services are provided to the child. An initial evaluation can be started either by the request of a parent, a request by the school or public agency, or through the child find process if they find a delay in a suspected disability. The procedures for an initial evaluation, they must be conducted within 60 days or in a time frame that a state sets, which can be less than 60 days. And I think Nebraska does that, but it can be no later than 60 days. And the evaluation must determine if the child has a disability. On the next page, it needs to determine the educational needs of the child. This section here was not covered in the simplification, and simply what it says is if the parent repeatedly fails or refuses to have a child evaluated, then a school is not responsible for getting them evaluated within the 60 days. Likewise, if a child is transferring out to another public agency, then they don't have to do it during that period either. But down here in Part E, they do have to follow up and make sure that it's still in the works, that the initial evaluation gets done within a specific time frame. So there's an affirmative duty to make sure it gets done. But if the parent doesn't cooperate, then they can't. And if the child's moving to another public agency, then their duty is just to follow up, make sure it happens. Section 300.302 was simply added to ensure that a screening is not considered an evaluation. An evaluation is a much more formal process that you have to go through in order to qualify a child and find them eligible for special education and related services. Section 300.304 is more detailed evaluation procedures. Notice must be provided to the parent. We have a copy of the notification and consent to initial evaluation that you can take a look at if you want to. The conduct of an evaluation, there must be a variety of assessment tools and strategies, including information provided by the parent. This was put in there specifically because they want input from you. And it's determining whether the child is a child with a disability. And the initial evaluation helps determine that the content, or what some of the content will be of the child's IEP when they go to an IEP meeting. They cannot use any single measure as the sole assessment criteria. So they have to use a multitude of testing. They have to use technically sound instruments. Other things that need to be considered in an evaluation is that they are selected not to be discriminatory or racial on a cultural basis, and they are administered in the native language or other mode of communication. The key here is you really need to know what the child knows, not that he has difficulty communicating in English. Just, it's really to gather information on what he knows, where he's at developmentally, and then use those evaluation results to determine his educational program. The assessments must be valid and reliable. They have to be administered by trained and knowledgeable personnel. They have to be certified in the testing that they're giving, and are administered in accordance with instructions provided by the producer of the assessments. The child needs to be assessed in specific areas of educational need, not just a single general IQ test, although that IQ test can definitely be part of the evaluation. Once again, this section talks about, let's find out what the child knows, not that the test is biased by any possible disability that the child may have are the speaking skills, and that included English proficiency, but also if they have problems enunciating. We're not testing their problems for enunciation, we're testing where they're at educationally, and so that's what this section deals with. The child needs to be assessed in all areas related to the suspected disability. There needs to be coordination between school districts, as we talked about before, to ensure the prompt completion of full evaluations. That is, when a child is going from one school district to the other, it needs to still be finished within a time frame that is reasonable so that the child can start receiving special education and related services.